The war on coronavirus continues, but we're going to call it the Wuhan Virus from now on here in the Freedom Hut. We'll have all the latest, everything we need to talk about coming up. Welcome to the Buck Sexton Show, everybody. We are still doing it from the studio here in New York City. You may see some changes for those of you that watch on Pluto. You may hear a slightly different tonality, I guess, in terms of the technical aspects of the show, because we may be setting up in a remote Freedom Hut location in the relatively near future. The show will still be exactly as it is in terms of the content and everything else, but things are getting pretty edgy here in New York City. People are concerned, and I've been talking to friends all across the country. Look, here's the reality. I mean, this is a news commentary show. We do a lot of other stuff here too. We're going to talk about this, and we're going to be talking about this story for the next at least 30 days. You got to figure probably the next 60, and who knows how much longer than that. So we are in a new phase, and that's why talking about it in terms of a war or an ongoing major conflict that pulls at everything in our society, and that's where we are. And, you know, we're going to talk about the most serious and most concerning aspects of it. We're going to discuss the things that make all of us nervous. We're going to look at government response, the politics around this, unavoidable. And we're also going to have a bit of gallows humor, a little bit of, you know, we got to keep our spirits up as we push through this. I said this to New York last night on WOR, but I'm saying it to you all as well. I am very, very confident that there will come a time in the not distant future when I'll be able to sit here and tell all of you, producer Mark and I had margaritas on a sidewalk cafe after the show last night in Tribeca down here in lower Manhattan. It's actually a beautiful part of New York City. And the streets are abuzz and everybody's okay, and you know we got through it. I'm very confident we will be able to have that, and I look forward to it. I look forward to that day when I can say that to all of you. You know, the market's rebounding, it's gorgeous weather, and we can start just the food fight over the election and whether it should be Trump or Biden all over again, although that's going to continue. But that day will come, and we'll be able to talk about that and celebrate it together. I hope it'll come in June. It might not come until August or September, but it'll be here. It will be here. So I think we all need to remember that. This is not going to be the new normal forever by any stretch. Because right now, man, it's people are rattled. You know, there's all these different pieces that move with this. What are the timelines of the virus spread? How well are hospitals equipped? The information overload that you have right now. I find myself at night reading so much about this that I have to force myself to just give a little bit, like an hour of time before I go to sleep, so that I don't just go to sleep thinking about Wuhan flu, coronavirus, the Wu flu. By the way, if I say coronavirus again, it's just because that's what we're being told to say. But remember, that's an imprecise way of talking about this. And when they say COVID-19, that's not how we refer to diseases usually, right? It would be like asking the general public to refer to animals by their Latin names, you know, by those. I think like a great white shark is a Carcharodon carcharias. Boom, knowledge. So, you know, those are some of these are the things that you'll think about constantly before you go to sleep, and then you go to sleep and you wake up and the streets here in the city are quiet, and this is going to be, and everyone I think recognizes it, because it's the greatest concentration of people living in the closest proximity to each other. You know, Los Angeles is a huge place, but Los Angeles is really spread out. Los Angeles is a city of many cities, and for people to stay home as long as they have access to food and the power's on and everything, there's less person-to-person connectivity in the day-to-day life there. I mean, here in New York, we are packed together on the streets. We are packed together on the subways. Many of you are like, Buck, why don't you come out to maybe this is the turning point. You know, maybe producer Mark and I need to pull up stakes and move out to, I don't know, somewhere lovely. Austin, Nashville, Denver. These are all cities that I think about sometimes. But that's for when we get through this. Unfortunately, we are right in the middle of this. We are dealing with a a national emergency that is going to test us in many, many ways. And I think that it's important for all of us that we understand that we're willing to speak to the anxieties of the moment, that we talk to each other, we support each other, we see the good that we can in people around us, and just, I hate stay calm is like telling somebody to calm down when they're upset, and it never works. You tell people to stay calm, and it immediately, at least in my mind, evokes somebody who's saying that as everybody's like scrambling for the lifeboats or something. Stay calm, and everyone's running for lifeboats. We really are going to be okay. And I think that, there are a lot of ways everyone's now making decisions based upon what they think of as a certainty about where this is all going. They think they know that. Fill in the following things, right? They think they know if A happens, B happens. I mean, I've got to tell you, just think about it this way. There are so many people who all they do is look at the direction of the stock market, the trajectory of different companies and what their earnings reports are going to be. And here we have Mother Nature just saying, yeah, you guys think you know what's coming? You think you understand the future? You understand what the plan is? You're wrong. Things change. They change very rapidly, and people don't see it coming. I look at this as right now, in the next 2 to 3 weeks, we're more or less going to know if we're entering an even more dangerous phase of this situation, based on all the different projections. We also have to look at the failure now to get testing kits out. Now testing kits are not the answer to everything. I think this has been an interesting area where there's real concern, and there's also room for real criticism here. The federal government, run by the Trump administration on this one, did not execute up to standards. Now, I think if you look at it honestly, the CDC and federal regulations and the federal bureaucracy, which I know, I worked at it, I understand it, moves very slowly, a lot of red tape, and there's a tremendous amount of what I call bureaucratic sloth. People, they're 10% of the people in these organizations do 90% of the important work. And that's just the truth. I mean, I know people don't like to hear this, and I'm sure it's the same thing with the CDC. But the testing kits, for there to be at this stage a manufacturing defect, I mean, Dr. Fauci has even said that this is a failure. Okay, so we're past now. Oh no, Buck, you can't say no. It's a failure, and that's real. But let's also understand. All right, so testing gives you a better sense of where you can try to contain this. But keep in mind that the disease, as we understand it right now, and I'll get into why it is important that we call it the Wuhan virus. Some people are also calling it, as shorthand, the Wu flu. I leave that to them. I may say that sometimes too. I think that it's important that we also don't allow this thing to become this beast that haunts our every waking moment. That creates this anxiety. Anxiety and fear become their own enemy in this whole process. It's so easy for all of us to just succumb to, oh gosh, I made a look, and I am going to have some gallows humor. Please understand, I'm here right in the center of this. I've been in a high risk population for getting the disease, in the sense that I'm in New York City. This is where there's the most cases so far, I believe, are in New York State and the New York City area. I'm on the subway. I have loved ones who are in the age risk category that I'm thinking about every day, all the time, that I'm trying to make sure that they're okay. So all of us understand the severity of this here, but it also does us no good once we've dealt with the real facts and the day-to-day and what we know and new information, to act like this thing gets to control us. This thing gets to be haunting our every waking and even sleeping moment, because, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? You're reading these projections. I'm sure there's been a spike. Look, I've downloaded a few books on the Spanish flu, although Sonia Shaw's book called Pandemic is something that I read on my own about a year or two ago, and I have to say it was very helpful in the early days of understanding, before everybody was talking about this so much, exactly what's going on here. And I'll also tell you, when you're looking at projections and trying to understand what the future will hold, everybody who studies pandemic disease has effectively been saying now that we would be in this position at some point in time, and then it would happen almost exactly the way that it does. These diseases originate in China, not all diseases, but these influenzas and these upper respiratory diseases, and it has to do with usually migratory fowl, often ducks, the migratory fowl population, and then there's the transfer of a virus that might not even do anything bad to the ducks, but that virus can be transferred to pigs, and pigs are animals that have a lot of similarities. So many, in fact, that you can do some transplants of different tissues, and I believe even some minor organs from pigs to human beings. That the transfer from the ducks to the pigs to the humans, this has been the concern. And now I know everyone's talking about a guy who ate bat soup, or it was a civet, or it was, I don't know, there was some other, a pangolin, these really rare animals. And by the way, why are people eating these animals? That is a fair question to ask. But, animals that are in the wild do present new cross-infection opportunities. Opportunities might be the wrong word. Cross-infection risks. And this is what has been, they've thought this is the way it's going to be for a long time. And now finally we're at this place. So we've known this was coming. And I'm actually here to remind everybody of that. This has been known for a long time. And, the Spanish flu has, in recent years, because of SARS and MERS, these other upper respiratory infections, it's gotten more attention than it has in a long time. But it was only a matter of time before we were at this place. And I will also tell you that when you look back, and I'll be discussing the history of Spanish influenza with you as we go forward in the weeks, because this is the news story right now, right? We'll talk about some other things, and I'll make some jokes about how, like, every time I push the elevator on the button here in the building, I'm just like, this is like, Russian roulette virus style. Every time I touch a button with my finger, I'm like, oh gosh. And inevitably, when I think about that too, that finger ends up, I touch my eye or my nose. I almost did it right now as I'm trying to tell you how I shouldn't do that. That's how much of a habit we're all in. So this is going to be a phase of our lives, and it's going to affect major decisions going forward about government. It's going to absolutely play a role in no matter what, it'll play a major role in the 2020 election. But there'll be other things about this, too, that I think we all recognize. We will be able to recognize, at least after the fact. This is going to change our perception of public health. This is going to change our perception of what's, of globalization, of all these different major forces that we tend to have a passive view of. These things are just happening. We're just dealing with it. Well, there's more than that. We can change course on certain things, or we can adjust. We can understand that this is not something we want to go through again. I'm going to try to give you as much as I can. It seems to be right now a worst case, best case analysis situation. That's what you're getting all the time. And what I know, and this was just from, not that the CIA gets everything right. It actually has gotten a lot of things very, very wrong. And I know that because I used to be there and I could see all the old assessments and go through them. And there are plenty of things the CIA has gotten wrong over time. But when you study predictions, especially predictions about major political movements or predictions about things like a pandemic, everyone focuses on worst case, best case in the beginning. And then it turns out, and you know where this is going, to usually be something in the middle. It usually tends to not be the very worst case, tends to not be the best case scenario. So I'm going to give you those two ends of it and hope that we can draw toward what is the most likely outcome here. Here's what producer Mark, did I give my little, oh no, I didn't, because I remember, so a friend of mine asked me yesterday here in New York City, and by the way, Mark and I are in it, like we're here in the midst of all this, he's taking public transport to get here. I've been taking public transport to get here. They might shut that down. There might be changes about that. We might have to get producer Mark a helicopter or a limousine or something. We'll find a place for that in the budget. But a friend of mine asked me yesterday, what do I think is really going to happen? And I wrote this out without even thinking about it. And it was one of those moments where I realized, this isn't, I wrote it to somebody thinking, this is just, if you ask me, like if you held a gun to my head, what's going to happen here in New York, which I think will be replicated in lesser degrees in other places. What would you say is likely to occur here? And I'll tell you what that is in just a second. Yeah, so this is what I texted a friend who's clearly very concerned about what's going on here because they're shutting down. We're in lockdown mode. And as long, and my opinion is, as long as we slow the spread of the disease enough so that our medical facilities can handle any influx of the severely ill, and as long as we still have people that are doing critical things, we need people keeping the electricity going, picking up the garbage, making sure the grocery stores have food, keeping the internet on. There are things that we just need to keep going. As long as those things stay in place, and I believe that they will. This isn't a natural disaster where we've dealt with it is kind of a natural disaster, but it's not, an earthquake or a major hurricane where all of a sudden there's no power, there's flooding, and you have to deal with that. This is a different kind of natural disaster. As long as that all stays in place, that infrastructure stays on, I think we got a pretty good shot of going through a few weeks of lockdown without it turning really ugly. I'm going to get into how it could turn ugly a little bit because we got to understand all aspects of this. And I know when I first started, I've got so much on this, folks. This is all I think about now every day, really. This is where I am. Here's what I told my friend, though. I thought I should share this with you. Things will calm down for a few days, but there'll be a spike in known cases next week when they get a bunch of test results back from the newly opened labs. At that point, people will realize there are thousands of infected here in the tri-state area and at least tens of thousands infected nationally, which means that community spread will be very hard, if not impossible, to contain. That's when hospital admissions will spike. And that's when everybody will really freak out. I think they may shut the subways here down and create quarantine zones in some major cities. NYC will basically come to a standstill for a week or two. Will we be more or less okay by June? Yes, but we're in for an ugly 60 to 90 days. That's where I think we are. That's what I think will happen here. I hope I am wrong, but I think that's a middle path. There are certainly worse outcomes that are out there. We also have to talk about the Chinese trying to put this on America, and there's a great power struggle here that this virus is at the center of. I'll get into that as well.
It goes away. It's going away. We want it to go away with very, very few deaths. People have, we call it cases. How many cases do you have? Well, relative to other countries, we have very few cases. Relative to certain of the major countries that really have a bigger problem than us. We've offered, just interestingly, I think we have the greatest doctors in the world. We've offered Iran assistance. Iran is having a tremendous problem. And we have offered Iran assistance. If they'd like it, we will help them. We'd be glad to help them.
So here's a part of this whole discussion that I don't think anybody has answers for, but this is certainly very important to our understanding of this. You are probably seeing today, there's a reason for, I think, substantial optimism, and then there's a reason for substantial concern. And these are the two ideas that keep bouncing back and forth in my head. You have globally about 140,000 cases. You've got about 5,000 deaths from this, right? So you're looking at a global mortality rate of around 2 to 3%, keeping in mind that established cases are, when I say keeping in mind, that doesn't get factored into the calculation, but you should keep in mind that confirmed cases are absolutely less than actual cases. There's no way that's not true. There are a lot of people that thought they had a cold or just, figured, I don't know what's going on here. They stayed home for a week and now they're going about their lives. They stayed home for 2 weeks, now they're going about their lives. There's this analysis right now. And look, the Drudge Report has been absolutely pedal to the metal on we should all be as scared as possible about this from the very beginning. Now, some people would say that's been the correct position at this point. We'll see. I don't think you could say that quite yet because China is a very crowded country with over 1 billion people. And the cities are, Wuhan has, I think, 8 or 10 million people. How many? Look, I'll admit this. How many even knew anything about Wuhan before the Wuhan virus, which is what we will call it? This is going to be a little bit like undocumented immigrant or undocumented person versus illegal alien. One term is more important and more precise, but because you'll hear the other one, people say, the undocumented persons, it starts to seep in your brain. So we've all been saying coronavirus so much that you don't think that I'm backing off of this when I say, if I'm trying to say Wuhan virus, but I say coronavirus, it's really just because, this is part of the propaganda effect out there. And I don't know why we would call something coronavirus when that's an imprecise way of describing it. And with so many other diseases, we describe it by the first place of known origin. And there's a reason why people, it's important. This isn't just getting down to the details and who cares. There's a reason for all of this. There's a reason why I think we need to focus on this. But I'm giving you now and we'll get into the politics of this and everything else. There's the reason that I see for optimism here is China's got 1 billion people, and they have had a few thousand deaths to this point, and they've been dealing with the virus for months, and they have over a population of over 1 billion, and they also suppressed it in the early days. Went after scientists who were trying to get the word out early. There was a government lockdown on this in a bad way, not meant to protect the public, meant to protect the Chinese Communist Party and the regime. Well, if China, which does have look, I was just in China about a year ago. Trust me, if you were given the option of being in a Chinese hospital or an American hospital, your standard American hospital, you would take 99 times out of 100. So there's no reason to believe that they have a better public health system for dealing with this than we do. How now? And you could also say, Buck, maybe they're lying about the numbers. Maybe they're lying about the numbers. And I say, yeah, that's certainly a possibility too. And so, if we don't trust their numbers, I don't know. They did put the virus sequence out there so people could start developing tests for it. But if they don't put the numbers out, or rather, if we can't trust their numbers, I don't know how we can really even analyze the situation in China. I do trust the numbers in South Korea, though. I do trust the numbers in Hong Kong and Singapore, countries that have gotten this under control. But let's focus on China for a second. If this disease is as easily transmitted and as dangerous as we've been led to believe by most of the media accounts, wouldn't we have to consider it almost a miracle? If Chinese numbers are correct, that you only have a few thousand, I'll give you the updated number as of today, so I can stop just saying, a few thousand. So you have, Italy's coronavirus death toll is over 1,000 people. And I'm trying to see what the Chinese coronavirus death toll is. Anyway, it can't be more. The overall death toll is 5,000. So let's say you've got 3,000 roughly dead in China. I think that's about what the number is. That's very, very small considering the entire population of China would have been at risk for this for weeks and just free transmission of this for weeks before anybody was doing anything. And I know that they've taken pretty extreme measures to lock this down, but okay, the measures are effectively versions of what we're doing here, cleaning public areas, keeping people home, limiting social interaction, social contact, all this stuff. Why would we then have to be told, as we are being told, that there's a likelihood in this country, a serious likelihood that we'll have 500,000 people dead from this, which is what we're being told by some of these estimates apparently coming from health experts. Now, for that to be true, and I'm not saying it's not true, I don't know. No one can predict the future. That's one of my most important. They're saying 150 million Americans could get infected. Okay, well, 150 million Americans getting infected, if you have a mortality rate of 2 or 3%, you're going to have a few million people who die. You got 1 billion Chinese. and we're months and months into this. It's supposed to spread very quickly and have a very rapid onset. Most people develop symptoms within days of exposure, they believe, although there are these other, there's all these competing theories and stories out there for medical professionals. Taking a step back for a moment, this is just also, the doctors, nurses, they do all these amazing things, and they are on the front line. They are the Praetorian Guard, or actually, no, more than that. The Praetorian Guard is usually in the back. They're the frontline soldiers. They are the Marines of this war. They're the grunts of this war against this virus. I mean, they're the ones that are right there, taking it and dishing it out to the other side. This time, the other side is a virus, but there's a lot that modern medicine doesn't know. I think we have generally been led to believe, because of some of the amazing things we can do with cancer treatments, and that modern medicine has more answers than it does. There are a lot of big questions out there that the medical community still is. I know they're trying to answer them, but they don't have answers to. And if you want a very low level version of this, and something far less serious what we're talking about here, just go into a doctor and say, you have IBS, and doctors will give you 50 different reasons for it and 50 different things you can do about it, and it's kind of like good luck. Sorry about your IBS, right? Then that's just but millions and millions and millions of people have that in this country. I think they estimate 10 to 20 million people suffer from it pretty regularly. I don't have answers to that. Now, that's obviously not a pandemic and people aren't dying from it, but I'm just saying there's a lot that modern medicine doesn't know yet. And when you see all these different analyses from people in the medical profession, or estimates or guesses, you start to think, okay, what do we really know here? What do we really have an understanding of? So the upside, the big upside that I see, is that you've had not only slowed transmission rates in other countries, so it is possible to slow this thing down. That's good. But also that in China, you've had really, relatively speaking, so few deaths in total that it makes me think, well, can't we expect there to be a similar, if not better, outcome here, especially because we're taking these precautions? Again, I don't know. I do, and now, so that's on the good side of things, right? The good side of things. And as you know, 80% of people, they keep repeating this, 80% of people get a relatively mild disease with some, flu-like or cold, really more like cold-like symptoms. You get a fever. That's not really so much with a cold, but you get a fever and you get a dry cough. Those seem to be the two most common. Definitely the fever, and usually the dry cough, and it can linger. Now, on the side of greater concern, I would say a couple of things. One, we keep seeing this 140,000 people worldwide have gotten the disease, confirmed to have gotten the disease, and 60,000 have recovered. Okay, that's less than half the people that have had the disease. Now, does that mean that 80,000 of them have just gotten the disease in the last couple of weeks, and so they're not yet confirmed? That's possible. But I do have concerns that maybe this illness can linger longer than people realize. And that's also where you get into the how long are people going to be contagious with this? And, once you've had it, I suppose you're going to have to wait till you get a negative test back before you really know that you don't have the risk of making contagious for anybody else. Now that's where I think we really are with this, that we need to figure out what the incubation period is. And there's the possibility even viruses react differently with different people. And this has always been the case. There are a lot of viruses that people show no symptoms for, that there's still something called viral shedding that goes on, which means that you're, in whatever way you're transmitting it, little viruses are getting out, and you can still give it to somebody. So that's why, there's some uncertainty here. Next week, I think we should all be prepared for this, and I want to say this to you now. And what was it, a few days ago, I said, look, I think we're going to have some days. And then the next day, I was like, yep, we're having a day where we got to batten down the hatches and get ready for the squall that's coming. Next week is going to be a bad week for this. So I want us to all get, and by the way, don't this weekend, give yourself a break. I mean, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm telling producer Mark's actually moving this weekend. So he, unfortunately, dude, we are all, I just want to say, I know that people like this is a global pandemic or whatever, but you have to deal with the global pandemic too. And you are moving your home this weekend.
And when all the rumors were coming out, my wife was freaking out that like they were going to shut down the roads and shut down the transit system, and it was bad.
Yeah.
I'm just hoping tomorrow happens.
Yeah, I think you're good for tomorrow. It's better that it's tomorrow than next week.
Yes.
But I'm starting moving. You know, I've moved far too much in life. Unfortunately, I've just, for different reasons, for jobs and for, things, I've moved too many times. Moving is very stressful. So I understand the stress of that everyone feels right now, particularly in this city, because we know there are people walking around with coronavirus. We know that. CBS had to shut down its offices for a day to do a cleaning. I'm also not sure.
They're not opening their offices again for anher week.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I just knew they shut it down for the day. Now it's a week. Yeah, because you
Uh-huh.
work. So producer Mark also does some work at, he does work all over the city and has friends and contacts that know about what's going on. I just focus on the Freedom Hut.
I know you do.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, this is the, this is the way the city is right now. Everyone's very anxious. Everyone's very, concerned about this stuff. And, yeah, I got to say, right now, this weekend, you got to let yourself be with family, stay home, stay in place. If you have to go out, have to means have to, right? I mean, this is the reason I'm here. It's the reason Mark's here. Like, we got to put on a show. We got to be here to do the show. We might figure out some ways to leverage technology so that we don't have to be co-located, because Mark and I have been talking about this. If one of us is near somebody who thinks if one of us is near somebody who has self-quarantined, then really we have to self-quarantine, because if he has to self-quarantine, I have to self-quarantine. And now we're like, now we got a big problem because now we can't do the show. So we're going to try to figure out a way to be able to keep the show. We're going to keep the show going no matter what, but we're figuring out the technology in that right now. This is a long way of saying, this is a weekend where you should really take care of yourself, rest. It's important. I know this sounds like, advice from fake Dr. Buck or something. It's important for your immune system. It's important that you psychologically give yourself, this weekend is the weekend to binge on Netflix, read that book, calm down, give your mind, you've had to make so many, wherever you are in the country, wherever you are around the world right now, you've had to make so many decisions about this, whether you're pulling your kids out of school or not, what you're going to do with your kids now that they're home, what you're doing about your investments in the market. And that's one place. Do not panic. Okay. Don't panic sell. Bad idea. Sell if you want, but don't panic sell. So, there's all these different decisions and you have decision fatigue. Your mind gets clouded with, what am I going to do next? What am I going to do next? This weekend, I'm going to say it. Those of you who pray obviously already know. You don't need me to tell you. It's a good weekend for prayer. I don't mean prayer like, oh my gosh, terrible things are going to happen. I mean pray for that connection to God. But you can also try meditation. I am going to be doing a little bit of yoga this weekend. We've all been absorbing this. We've all been, just the last week or so in particular, pulling in all this anxiety and stress. Stress is very immunosuppressive, and it's also not helpful for you to make the best decisions you need to for you and your family going forward. So if you have off this weekend, if you're already staying where you are, or if you're in a place where, some of you are like, Buck, I don't see my neighbors, unless I drive, 2 miles in one direction, right? Well, that's great. And, take this time, because next week things are going to get ugly. I'm pretty confident. I'm not certain. I'm pretty confident, because that's when everyone's going to realize, oh, the numbers are much higher. The lack of testing has made us think that there are fewer cases than there are, and there's a lot more community spread than we realized. And then they're going to start worrying about, are we going to see the surge in the hospital the week after that? So be prepared. Next week is not going to be a good week. Next week is going to be tough. Rest this weekend. Take care of yourself this weekend.
Dr. Fauci, will there be cities on lockdown in the United States?
I don't know. I mean, as I always say, you've got to keep everything on the table. You would hope that you wouldn't have to resort to these draconian moves of actually locking down a city. But it depends on what happens. I hope we never get to that. But you never take anything off the table when you're dealing with protecting the health of the American public.
That's a way of saying that we could have whole cities under quarantine, my friends. And this is what I was getting at. Be prepared for that next week. It won't be forever. It's also about lengthening out the lengthening out what our health system can handle at one time, trying to disperse the cases more on a timeline so that it's not all a big spike at one time. That's why Italy got so just crushed. But we could see that, and we could see it as soon as next week.